Again. Really, we're doing this again. Does it ever end? Yeah, in the ongoing effort to make the Nighthawk more rideable, I guess, we're back into the suspension. But this time, we've gone all out. It's time to bring in the big guns, I guess. Last year, we attempted these progressive fork springs. See the tighter windings near the bottom. And we thought maybe that would be the cure to our problems, but I looked into it a little bit more, and I thought that at its full length, it would be just as stiff as a stock spring and then get stiffer as it compresses. That's not really the case. It seems like it's as stiff as a stock spring when it's compressed, when you're into those tighter coils. So the bike was no better, really. Plus, then you were still dealing with the typical 80s suspension stuff where it was still really harsh over bumps, and which is just par for the course for these damper rod forks, right? So now we're going with Racetech springs, much stiffer. Actually, shorter spring, but much heavier coil. Then the big one to help smooth out the ride is the gold valve emulators. So we're just in the process of installing that, and when you make the decision to do this, there's kind of no turning back, because see, these are the original oil feed holes for the damper rod piston, and here's the two new ones that I drilled in there. So yeah, I've got extra forks, so if I decide to strip them and swap stock parts back into these, I can, but I'm hoping that I'll never want to do that. As for the basic rundown of the install, though, it's pretty simple. This is basically it. The valve is going to be sandwiched in between the piston and the spring, after drilling your extra holes, of course. This is still the old spring here, but you get the idea. So we won't get too in-depth into this. This isn't going to be a step-by-step how to install video or anything like that, but we'll see how this turns out. Hopefully we can cut to a scene in a minute here where we're out riding the bike and having a great time. Wow, doing some work near the old airport. Well, never mind that. That is not the important part. That is not what we're out here for. We're out here because this thing is reassembled again. The Racetech springs are in, the damper rod pistons have been modified, and the gold valve emulators are in. Everything set up to Racetech's baseline specs. And I mean, I've only gone to get gas and put on an extra 3 kilometers here since then, but I can safely say this is a whole new bike. This bike now feels like it probably should have the day it was built. These forks were very, very undersprung. The least little bump you hit, it would bottom out. And then I put those progressive springs in from Progressive Suspension, and I only found out later that the spring rate is pretty much just equal to stock, but it's only equal to stock when it's compressed, because they're supposed to stiffen up as they compress, you know, progressively wound springs. So that would mean at normal travel, like without compressing them, just at ride height, that means they were even weaker than the stock ones. And I kid you not, if I would exit my driveway too fast, as soon as the front wheel would hit pavement, it would bottom out. Like, that's how bad it was. But I mean, the fact that they don't bottom out, it's nice, don't get me wrong. It was damn near dangerous at times, but I kind of knew that they weren't going to bottom out anymore, right? I put fork springs in here that were, I forget how they rated, like kilogram per millimeter, I think. These were 0.85, and I'm pretty sure the stock ones are something like 0.5. So I mean, significantly stiffer. So I knew they weren't going to bottom out, and they're not, and that's great. The other part of the equation, though, was the emulators. They're supposed to address the other part of 80s damper rod forks, the fact that they're so damn harsh over sharp bumps. Like, it's almost counterintuitive. It kind of doesn't make sense how you can have a fork that's so damn soft that it bottoms out so easily, but if you hit any amount of bumps in the road, it sends the whole thing right up through the bars and just shakes the crap out of you. Look at that, pretty nice moderate braking there. Not feeling the front end dive like crazy. So now this will be a bit more of a test for the emulator side of it, getting into a little bit more rougher pavement. Because I mean, this part of it was just as important as stopping it from bottoming out all the time. I wanted to make this bike comfortable to ride. I mean, it could be a nice little cruiser for me, but every time I try to go for a cruise, it just beats the snot out of me. I must say, so far, major difference. Like, I can still feel bumps in the bars, obviously, but just like any other motorcycle, not like violently shaking my hands and sending shocks right up through my arms. And that's just with Racetech stock settings. You basically input your information, your riding style, your weight, what you plan to do with the bike, and they'll spit out some settings for you. And that's exactly what I went with. Oh man, this is night and day. Like, this is not that rough of a road, but it would be beating the crap out of me normally. I've driven through this road on this bike before doing the suspension work, and it was pretty brutal. Oh yeah, like those chattery bumps one after another. The front end still feels planted. It doesn't feel like it's, you know, hopping the front wheel or something, and you'd almost swear you were going to lose traction at times. You wouldn't dare hit bumps like that leaned over in a turn. Now, the cost of this, when I first looked at it, it's like, man, that is a lot of money. There's a lot of money for a 40-year-old bike on the chance that it helps. But you know, I got talking to Racetech. I emailed them directly. I was talking to Matt, their vintage specialist. He knew right away, there was no question that this was going to improve it, like vastly improve it. You can just tell by the information he's given you. Plus, I mean, this isn't exactly Racetech's first rodeo, right? They've got plenty of customers, including some of my friends, that just rave about the work they do. But again, you know, by the time this was all said and done, shipped to my door and everything, we're looking at just about $600. I guess it would be with the fork seals and with the oil, it's probably peaked a little over 600 now. But the way I looked at it was, if that's the cost to make this bike enjoyable and get me out riding it more, then it's a very small price to pay. And so far, I would say it worked. See, I read some posts on the internet, as usual, went into like Facebook groups and stuff like that, and started reading up on what other people were doing with this thing, and you had people swearing by progressive forks. But these same people were also saying things like, oh, the stock forks are great, but if you want to take it up a notch, go with the progressive springs. Well, the second they said that the stock forks were great, I should have just, you know, closed the browser at that point. Now we're back to the point where the braking is the weak point on this bike, and you have to remind yourself to slow down. But yeah, I was convinced that progressive fork springs were the way to go. So we gave it a shot. That was something like 200 bucks. Look at these bumps, look. It's like nothing. It's like nothing. Like, that is some nasty bumps for this bike. I would have been puckered going through that, you know, last season. Because I'm sure, not only would it have been shaking the crap out of my arms to the point where it would have been hard to control, then it would have probably also bottomed the suspension out at the same time. Oh, it's a lovely combination to deal with. So yeah, the progressive springs. You know, I wasn't fully convinced that they were going to be the solution, but they were a little over 200 bucks, and it was like the what ifs were in your head, right? What if I only spend 200 bucks and drop a set of springs in it and it fixes everything? Like, you know how easy it is to just change a set of springs? Like, realistically, you could do it with the fork still on the bike. And I think at the time, I think I had a fork seal starting to leak at that time anyway, so what the hell, right? Pull them off, do the seal, swap the springs. But it was apparent right from the beginning that they were not the solution. They probably made things worse. Like, in some situations, I'm sure they're great. Like, if you've got a bike that's, you know, almost oversprung, kind of stiff, they would do a good job, you know, smoothing out the ride, I'm sure, but that just wasn't my situation. It's actually not the situation for a lot of people, because most times if you're looking to modify suspension on a motorcycle, it's not because it's oversprung. Usually, anyway. I'm sure those situations are out there, but my God, what a difference. I've got to find Jake. Jake rode this in another video. I think he's the only one of my friends that's actually driven this. I'm sure he wouldn't remember, you know, just how pitiful the suspension was at that time, but I'd love to have him try it again. Jake is familiar with 80s bikes, so I'm sure he could get on this and appreciate the difference. So I guess in this situation I should probably mention also, when I plan to buy Race Tech parts, I kind of assume that you get them from a local dealer through like Parts Canada or something like that, or Fort 9, because I know they deal with Race Tech also. So I spoke with Race Tech and got the information from them, what parts were recommended, and then I went on the hunt to find them. Turns out they were a little more difficult to find than I thought. I called some dealers who I knew dealt with Parts Canada, and they're like, no, we don't deal with Race Tech. Okay, fine. I'm not going to convince you to take my money, but... So I called another dealer, and they said, nope, not available. One of the part numbers, either the springs or the emulators, were back ordered maybe, and the other was discontinued. Unavailable. Fort 9, same thing. One of them was out of stock on their website. The other one wasn't even listed. I emailed them. They said the same thing. The one that isn't listed isn't even available. So I know that Jake actually dealt with Bayside Performance in BC when he bought his Race Tech stuff. So I emailed them and I said, you know, can you guys get this? I was speaking to Race Tech directly, and they never mentioned anything about this stuff being discontinued or anything. So they looked into it, and sure enough, yeah, they basically had to buy it directly from Race Tech and have it shipped to them, and then just forwarded it on to me. But great communication throughout the whole thing. You know, they even verified with me. They after emailing Race Tech got back to them and said, well, you know, we want some more information here. What kind of bike is he putting this on? Just, you know, verifying that they're selling me the correct parts, which is nice. It's a minor delay, but that guarantee that they're doing it right, it's nice. So yeah, once all that was sorted out and they hit a mailbox on Race Tech's end, and within probably less than a couple weeks they were at my doorstep. They showed up on Monday. I kind of started picking away at it then, and then all of a sudden realized I didn't buy fork seals. I thought I had a set of fork seals, I did not. So I had to order those, and they showed up today. So I was at that point in the assembly that I was ready for seals, so rammed the seals in and got the forks back on the bike. Oh man, there's like no dive on the brakes either. And now there's no dive on the brakes, and that's after disabling Honda's anti-dive, their track system. It's no longer needed when you properly set the forks up. Same goes for the air assistance. These shocks typically have about 15 psi of air in them. No more. 0 psi in there now. I mean, it's not just Honda that use nonsense like that. I mean, these are Showa forks, Honda, right? I think KYB had their own setup similar. But it just goes to show, like, you're adding complexity and nonsense to these things, and it's no better. It's, you know, it's probably worse in a lot of situations. Like my situation, it was 100% worse. Unnecessary. You know, all it really needed was a proper set of springs and a little valve about this big. Instead, we've got, you know, air assist forks, so you gotta monitor air pressure in, and then this front brake setup for the anti-dive that is just overly complicated for no reason. You're adding a mechanical element into it to make the forks actuate from the brakes. It's it's done. I'm so glad it's over. It's funny because after my father stopped riding this, that was basically it. I think my Bandit is the last bike that I've seen him ride anyway, but that was only shortly after he stopped riding this one. Since then, I've offered up, you know, every bike I've had if he wants to go for a ride on it. No, but I'm gonna have to convince him to get back on this one. Like, just a little ride, just take it out and feel what this bike should have felt like when you owned it. Like, it seems crazy to be just rolling over bumps like this without a worry. And it's like, I didn't want this to be some sort of special bike that, you know, I can run so fast on it and it handles so well. And no, I just wanted it to be a normal motorcycle, something you can just get on and ride and not have to worry about it. So far, it's mission accomplished. How's this for a test? I would have never attempted this. Well, I would have, but I wouldn't have enjoyed it, that's for sure. This bike actually spent a lot of time on dirt roads. I've never been down here. It's a good place for a picture. She's a real bird of prey now, so she can be the Honda Seagull. We're coming up on 40 kilometers in now. On the rough roads it's nice, but on the smoother roads like this it's really nice. You know, the bike was tolerable on smooth roads before. Now it's really nice. Now once again, I just got to get used to the seating position. Very different from the sport bikes I usually ride. I think if I can get the hang of that, then I could probably put on quite a few miles on this thing. It's kind of a pain in the butt when I discovered it, but while I was in there too, I noticed that the steering head needed to be adjusted. Put a new set of bearings in there whenever I first rebuilt this thing, and I'm guessing they must have seated in just a little bit. Had just a little bit of play in them. Managed to get it adjusted without totally stripping the front end. This is the same guy on the bicycle. He got ahead of me again. So I guess this turned out to be a positive episode in the Nighthawk saga. Not only a repair, not only fixing something, but also making a major improvement. Setting the bike up to make it much more rideable. It's still got a couple things though that will help keep me in check, keep the speed in check. Number one is the brakes. These are still very much 1980s brakes. And of course this air-cooled 750 engine, you know, even when she was much younger, she'd still run out of steam pretty quick. Now I don't want to push her too hard anyway. It would be nice to spruce up the brakes a bit, but I don't know what the heck would even be available to improve them, where they have such a strange setup with that whole anti-dive. Anyway, still gotta end this day on a real high note by going to work an evening shift. Yeah, so I better head home. It looks like there should be plenty more rides with this thing coming up though, as long as I find the time to do it.